A 16-year-old is rejected for being obese. Right there in front of the whole town at the church social. The laughter stings, the bell tolls, and she runs in till a shadow falls over her. A lonely giant cowboy steps forward, towering over the jeering crowd, and offers her a place at his table. But what begins as a simple act of kindness uncovers a secret her late mother left behind, a hidden water claim tied to sacred land. And the railroad will stop at nothing to take it. In a town where prejudice runs deep and land means power, their fight for justice could unite a community or tear it apart. Can they protect the spring that holds more than just water? Or will they lose everything to greed and fire? Your reactions remind me why these stories matter. If you still believe in the quiet power of love, justice, and truth, then you're part of the reason I keep sharing them. Lucy May Hollis smoothed her mother's calico dress one last time before stepping onto the church green. The fabric, worn, soft from years of careful washing, brought comfort even as her heart fluttered with nerves. She'd spent all morning getting the peach pie just right, using the last of her precious sugar to make it special for the social. The late afternoon sun warmed her shoulders. As she made her way through the bustling crowd, ladies in their Sunday best arranged dishes on checkered cloths while children darted between grown-ups' legs. The charity table stood near the church steps, loaded with offerings meant to help those in need. Lucy May held her pie steady, chin lifted despite the whispers that followed her progress. A cluster of girls her age huddled near the punch bowl, their heads bent together like stalks of wheat in the wind. She recognized Emma Jean Potter's tinkling laugh, sharp as breaking glass. "Land sakes, would you look at that dress, Emma Jean?" Stage whispered. "Trying to make tent cloth look fancy, I reckon." Heat crawled up Lucy May's neck, but she kept walking. Her mama hadn't raised her to shrink from meanness. The pie was good. She knew it was good. And somebody in need would appreciate it. She was 3 steps from the charity table when Deputy Walter Creech's voice rang out across the green. "Well now, looks like somebody's mighty eager to sample the offerings." His hand rested on his gun belt. Thumbs hooked in that way, he thought, made him look important. "Might want to save some for the rest of us, Miss Lucy May." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Lucy May's fingers trembled against the pie tin. She'd known Deputy Creech since grammar school, when he'd been just Walter, the boy who pulled her braids and called her Lucy May Can't, Saina to Cake. Seems a deputy's badge hadn't changed him much. Reverend Abel Cartwright hurried over, his worn Bible clutched to his chest like a shield. Now, he said, voice reedy with discomfort. Perhaps it would be best if," he cleared, his throat glancing between Lucy May and the growing crowd. "If you'd just step away from the table for a moment, dear. Let's avoid any ... confusion." The words hit like a physical blow. Lucy May stood frozen, the pie suddenly heavy in her hands. The crowd had drawn back, leaving her alone in a circle of stares and smothered laughs. Tears pricked at her eyes, blurring the neat rows of pies and casseroles into smears of color. She turned, ready to flee, but found her path blocked by a broad chest in a work-worn shirt. Looking up and up, she met the steady gaze of Caleb Big Hal Thorne. He stood like an oak tree among saplings, his presence drawing every eye on the green. Without a word, Cal reached down and gently took the pie from her trembling hands. He unwound the red neckerchief from his throat with deliberate care, wrapping it around the pie tin like it was made of gold. When he spoke, his deep voice carried across the sudden hush. Folks round here seemed to have forgotten their manners. He settled the wrapped pie in the crook of his arm. "Ah, and there's scripture too, I reckon. 1 Samuel chapter 16 verse 7 might be worth reviewing, Reverend." His eyes, kind but firm, found Lucy May's tear-bright ones. "Ah, person's true. Measure ain't found in what others can see." Deputy Creech shifted his weight, badge glinting as his hand dropped to his gun belt. "Now see here, Thorne, Miss Hollis," Cal continued as if the deputy hadn't spoken. "I've got a pot of coffee brewing and some fresh biscuits waiting at home. Would you do me the honor of sharing supper with me this evening?" Lucy May's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew Cal Thorne by reputation, everyone did. His former trail boss, now running a small spread out by Blue Jacobs. Folks said he hadn't been the same since losing his sister to fever 2 years back. He kept to himself mostly, but his word carried weight when he chose to give it. Double quotes her voice caught. She swallowed hard and tried again. "I would be pleased too, Mr. Thorne." A smile warmed his weathered face. "Call me Cal, Miss Lucy May. Everybody does." He offered his free arm with old-fashioned courtesy. "Shall we?" Lucy May slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, feeling the solid strength there. As Cal guided her away from the charity table, she heard Reverend Cartwright fumbling with his Bible pages, no doubt searching for that verse Cal had mentioned. They walked past Emma Jean and her friends, past Deputy Creech with his hand still hovering near his gun, past the tables laden with food she wouldn't have to see go to others while her own offering was scorned. With each step, Lucy May felt her spine straightening, her chin lifting higher. "That was a mighty fine-looking pie," Cal remarked as they reached the edge of the green. "Peach, Sir Cal," she corrected herself. "Made it this morning. Used Mama's recipe. Your mama was Sarah Hollis, wasn't she? The laundress?" Lucy May nodded, surprised he remembered. "Yes, she passed last winter. Fine woman, your mama. Always had a kind word, even for folks others wouldn't spare the time of day. For—" He paused at the hitching post where his big bay gelding waited. "She taught you her recipes, and her figures too. She said a woman needs both in this world, how to feed folks and how to keep her accounts straight." Cal's laugh was rich and warm. "Wise woman, your mama. Now, how do you feel about riding? Thunder here is gentle as a lamb, though he might not look it." Lucy May eyed the tall horse, then gathered her skirts. "I reckon I can manage, with a little help up." Cal's hands were sure and respectful as he helped her mount, then swung up behind her with the wrapped pie secured in his saddlebag. As they rode away from the church green, Lucy May felt the weight of stairs on her back, but for the first time in years. She didn't feel crushed by them. The late afternoon sun painted the dusty street in shades of gold, and ahead lay the promise of coffee, biscuits, and conversation with someone who saw past the surface to measure what truly mattered. Lucy May smiled, thinking of her mama's words. "The good Lord sends help in his own time, child. You just got to be brave enough to accept it when it comes." Today, Lucy May reckoned she'd found that courage. And somehow, she knew this Sunday afternoon would mark the beginning of something new. Something that would change not just her life, but the whole of Cottonwood Flats in ways none of them could yet imagine. Thunder's hooves kicked up small puffs of dust as Cal guided them along the winding trail toward Blue Jacob's Eye. Lucy May sat straight, but easy in the saddle, her back warm against Cal's chest as they followed the meandering path that curved around rust-colored buttes and through stands of juniper. The late afternoon sun stretched their shadow long across the ground, making giant and girls seem even taller than they were. "Not much further now," Cal said, his deep voice gentle. "Trail opens up just past these rocks." True to his word, the path widened into a small valley cupped by weathered cliffs. A modest-lined shack stood in a protected hollow, its weathered boards glowing golden in the setting sun. A clear spring bubbled up from the rocks nearby, feeding a small garden plot where Lucy spotted tomato vines and what looked like squash, leaves spreading across the dark soil. "It ain't much," Cal said as he helped her down from Thunder's back, "but it's home." Lucy May smoothed her calico skirt, taking in the neat wood pile stacked against the wall and the swept dirt yard. "It's lovely," she said softly, meaning it. Inside, a copper lamp cast warm light over scrubbed plank floors and simple furniture. A bookshelf held maybe 24 volumes, their spines well-worn but cared for. Cal moved easily through the space, stirring up the banked coals in the cook stove and adding kindling. "Your room's through here," he said, leading her to a small chamber off the main room. "Used to be my sister Jenny's before the fever took her 2 years back." His voice held old grief, worn smooth like a river stone. "Ain't been touched since." Then, "But the bedding's clean. It's had a feeling someone might need it someday." The room was small but tidy, with a narrow bed covered in a faded quilt and a pine dresser beneath a small window. A rag rug softened the floor, its blues and browns, woven in a pleasant pattern. "I'll get some stew heating," Cal said, leaving her to settle in. "Take whatever time you need." Lucy May set her carpetbag on the bed, unpacking her few possessions with careful hands. Her mother's Bible went on the small bedside table, along with the sewing kit she'd inherited. At the bottom of the bag, wrapped in an old shawl, she found items she didn't recognize: a worn leather ledger, its pages filled with her mother's neat figures, a folded paper that looked like a survey sketch, and a sealed document marked. With the territorial government stamp, she traced the unfamiliar markings on the survey, noting what looked like elevation lines and watercourses before tucking everything safely into the dresser drawer. The mystery of these papers would keep until tomorrow. The smell of heating stew drew her back to the main room where Cal had set 2 bowls on the simple table. Steam rose from the pot on the stove, carrying the scent of beef and vegetables. "Ain't fancy," Cal said, ladling out portions. "But it'll stick to your ribs." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the quiet broken only by the spring's gentle burble through the open window and the occasional clink of spoons against bowls. Lucy May found herself relaxing, the tension of the afternoon's humiliation slowly easing from her shoulders. "Your mama taught you figures, you said?" Cal asked finally, breaking the quiet. Lucy May nodded. "Yes, sir, Cal," she corrected herself again. "She did the books for half the businesses in town, keeping their accounts straight." "Reckon you inherited her skill with numbers?" "I helped her some, toward the end when her eyes were failing." Cal nodded thoughtfully. "Tay could use someone with a head for figures to help with my remuda accounts. Got about 30 horses I gentle for resale each season, plus the breeding stock. Been meaning to keep better records." He glanced at her over his coffee cup. "If you're interested, that is." Lucy May felt warmth bloom in her chest that had nothing to do with the stew. "I'd like that very much." "We can start tomorrow then, if you're settled enough." He rose, gathering their empty bowls. "Best get some rest now. Been a long day." In her room, Lucy May changed into her nightdress and slipped beneath the quilt. The spring song drifted through her window, a gentle lullaby that seemed to whisper of peace and possibility. For the first time since her mother's passing, she felt truly safe. She thought of the mysterious papers in her drawer, wondering what secrets they might hold, but those questions could wait. For now, she let herself sink into the comfort of clean sheets and the knowledge that she had found, however unexpectedly, a harbor in her storm. The lamp's glow from the main room dimmed as Cal banked the fire for the night. Lucy May heard his quiet footsteps, the creak of his own bed across the house. Then silence broken only by the spring's endless murmur. She closed her eyes, feeling gratitude wash over her like the water song outside her window. Dawn broke over Blue Jacob's eye with the sound of mourning doves. Lucy May was already up, having slept better than she had in months. She'd found eggs in the henhouse and was frying them with the last of yesterday's biscuits when hoofbeats echoed from the trail. Through the window, she saw 2 riders approaching. A distinguished older woman on a paint horse and a young man on a sturdy bay. The woman's silver hair was wrapped traditionally in a bun, her velvet skirt and cotton blouse neat despite the dusty ride. The young man wore ranch clothes with a bright bandana at his throat. Cal stepped out to greet them. "Shandio," he called, tipping his hat. "Nate, welcome." "Good morning, friend." Shandio Nez dismounted with practiced grace. Her grandson Nate swung down beside her, leading both horses to the water trough. "Brought you some blue cornmeal," Shandio said, lifting a cloth-wrapped package from her saddlebag, "and wool from the spring shearing. The colors reminded me of your sister's favorite blanket." Lucy May appeared in the doorway, suddenly shy. Cal gestured her forward. "Here's Lucy May Hollis. She's staying with me now, helping with the books." "Ah, Sarah Hollis's daughter." Shandy's dark eyes were warm and knowing. "Your mother was a friend to my people." "Welcome to Blue Jacob's Eye." Lucy bobbed a small curtsy. "Thank you, ma'am. Would you like some breakfast?" "The eggs are just ready." They gathered around Cal's table, the morning sun streaming through the windows. Lucy had set out her mother's papers while cooking, meaning to study them properly. Shandy's gaze fell on the survey sketch, and her expression sharpened with recognition. "These markings," she said, running a finger along the elevation lines. "They show the spring's path through the rocks where it joins the wash below. Our sheep have grazed this route for generations." Lucy looked up from serving eggs. "You know this place well?" "Since I was a girl, younger than you." "Your mother understood its importance to both our peoples." Shandio carefully unfolded the sealed document. "This is a water notice. Sarah filed it 5 years ago, naming you as heir to her claim." Cal leaned forward, a formal filing. Yes, she wanted to ensure the spring remained open to all, both settler and dine herders. Shandy's voice held approval. "A wise woman, your mother." Nate, who had been quiet, spoke up. "That's why she kept such careful records in the ledger, tracking water levels. Grazing rotations, who used the spring when." Lucy's hands trembled slightly as she opened the worn book. Her mother's neat columns recorded years of shared use. Names, dates, livestock numbers. Some entries were in English, others in careful dine notation. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought these were just old papers." The morning passed peacefully as Shandio shared stories of Sarah Hollis's friendship with her people. Lucy found herself relaxing in the older woman's presence, soaking in tales of her mother she'd never heard before. Near noon, they heard another horse approaching. This time it was Reverend Cartwright, his manner nervous as he dismounted. "Brought those hymnals you asked for, Cal," he said, then stopped short at the sight of the papers spread across the table. The color drained from his face. "Something wrong, Reverend?" Cal asked quietly. I need to speak with you, privately." The preacher's voice shook slightly. Cal nodded to Lucy and their guests. "Excuse us a moment." Outside, beneath the juniper trees, Reverend Cartwright wrung his hands. "Those papers, the water notice, Sarah brought it to me 5 years ago. Asked me to file it at the land office. And did you?" "I meant to, but there was so much prejudice in town then. Folks talking about Indian lovers and such. He swallowed hard. I used my own address on the filing. Said I'd forward any responses. Then the paperwork got mixed up in my office. I never did check if it went through proper." Cal's expression darkened. "You're saying that notice might not be in the land office records? It might be, or might have been lost. I've carried the guilt of it ever since." The Reverend's shoulders slumped. "Sarah trusted me, and I let fear rule my actions." Inside, unaware of this conversation, Lucy watched Shandio teaching her grandson to write entries in the ledger. The morning sun caught the silver in the older woman's hair, the earnest concentration on Nate's face as he carefully formed the letters. These papers weren't just her mother's keepsakes, Lucy realized. They were proof of something larger. Promise made between peoples, a right to be protected. She thought of yesterday's humiliation at the church social, how small they'd made her feel. But here, beside this spring that had nourished generations, she felt her mother's strength flowing into her like cool. Clear-watered when Cal returned, his expression was troubled, but he said nothing of his conversation with the Reverend Shandio. And Nate prepared to leave, promising to return soon with more stories and supplies. Remember, Shandio told Lucy as she mounted her horse, "Your mother's wisdom flows through you like the spring through the rocks, strong and steady, finding its own path." Lucy May watched them ride away, the morning's revelations settling in her heart like stones in a streambed. She had inherited more than just papers. She had inherited a trust, a responsibility to keep this place open and flowing for all who needed its waters. 2 days after Shandy's visit, the morning peace. At Blue Jacob's, ice shattered with the arrival of hoofbeats. Lucy May looked up from feeding the chickens to see 2 riders approaching Deputy Walter Creech and a well-dressed stranger she didn't recognize. The stranger sat his horse with city-bred precision, his vest and watch chain gleaming in the sun. Cal emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. His usual easy manner stiffened as the riders drew near. "Morning, gentlemen," he said, positioning himself between them and Lucy. The stranger dismounted first, tucking a rolled map under his arm. "Josiah Gant," he announced, extending his hand. "Railroad land agent, and you must be Mr. Thorne." Cal nodded but didn't shake the offered hand. Deputy Creech stayed mounted, fingering his badge self-importantly. "What brings the railroad out this way?" Cal asked. Gant's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Progress, Mr. Thorne. Cottonwood Flats is growing. The railroad needs a water tower to service the new spur line." He unfurled his map across the fence. "Rail Blue Jacob's Eye is the perfect source. Good pressure, reliable flow. This spring's already claimed," Cal said flatly. "Is it now?" Gant's gaze slid to Lucy, who clutched her egg basket tighter. "By the young lady here. That's what Deputy Creech mentioned." Creech smirked from his saddle. "Seems awful convenient, don't it? Girl shows up with some papers right when the railroad needs the water." Lucy's cheeks burned, but she lifted her chin. "They're my mother's papers. She filed proper notice 5 years ago." "Did she now?" Gant's tone dripped false sympathy. "Then surely you have proof of that filing. An official receipt, perhaps." Lucy's stomach nodded. She had the notice itself, but no receipt showing it had been properly recorded. "The spring serves both settler and dine herders," Cal cut in. "Has for generations." "Ah, yes, the Indians?" Gant rolled his map with careful precision. "Noble sentiment, Mr. Thorne, but sentiment doesn't build railroads. Progress requires water." His smile turned cold. "So here's how this works. Either prove your claim properly filed, or get out of the way." Deputy Creech chuckled, and Lucy's hands trembled on the basket. She remembered his cruel joke at the church social, how the townsfolk had laughed. "You're trespassing," Cal said quietly. "I suggest you leave." "Just delivering friendly notice." Gant swung back into his saddle. "You have 1 week to produce proof of filing. After that, ... he shrugged. "Progress stops for no one." They watched the riders disappear down the trail. Lucy's legs felt weak, and she sank onto the porch steps. "What are we going to do, Cal?" He sat beside her, his big frame somehow comforting. "First, we're going to check every record we can find. Your mama was smart. She wouldn't have left you unprotected. But what if, ... double quotes, Lucy swallowed hard. "What if we can't find proof? Everyone in town already thinks I'm worthless. I'll never believe me over the railroad. Hey now. Cal's voice was gentle but firm. Your worth ain't measured by their foolish words. Remember what Shandio said about your mother's wisdom? Lucy nodded, thinking of the careful entries in the ledger. Flowing like the spring through the rocks. That's right. And we're not in this alone. As if summoned by his words, they heard more hoofbeats. This time, it was Shandio riding up on her paint horse. I felt trouble on the wind, she said, dismounting. The railroad men were here. Cal nodded and explained the situation. Shandio listened gravely, her dark eyes thoughtful. The land office in Mesa Verde has all territory filings, she said finally. I can guide you there, but it's a long day's ride through rough country. Will they help us? Lucy asked. Being as the filing involves dying rights to Shandi's mouth tightened. Some clerks are honest. Others lose papers that mention Indian claims. We must be careful, but we must try. They spent the evening planning by lamplight. Cal would ready the horses while Lucy gathered provisions. Shandio would return at dawn to guide them. I'm scared, Lucy admitted as she and Cal sat at the table later. The lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls. What if they laugh at me like everyone else does? Then they'll answer to me. Cal's quiet words held steel. We'll search every file. In that office if we have to. I promise you that. Lucy looked at him gratefully. Remember how he'd defended her at the church social? Here was someone who saw her true worth, who believed in her right to stand her ground. Thank you, she whispered. Get some rest, he said, standing. Tomorrow's a long ride. Lucy lay awake that night, listening to the spring's steady music outside her window. She thought of her mother's careful records, of Shandy's stories about shared waters, of Cal's unwavering support. The railroad might have money and power, but she had something stronger, the truth of her claim, and people who would help her prove it. Still, she finally drifted off. Deputy Creech's mocking laugh echoed in her dreams, and she wondered if the truth would be enough against the ruthless tide of progress. The eastern sky was barely pink when Lucy stepped onto the porch of Cal's cabin. Her borrowed riding skirts swished against her boots as she carried her travel satchel to where the others waited with the horses. The spring's peaceful burble seemed to wish them well. Cal finished adjusting the cinch on Lucy's mount, a gentle bay mare. You ready? He asked softly. Lucy nodded, though her stomach fluttered. Shandio sat straight-backed on her paint horse, while her grandson Nate led to pack horses loaded with water barrels and supplies. Land office closes at sundown, Shandio reminded them. We should move quickly. Cal helped Lucy mount, his strong hand steady at her waist. The mare shifted beneath her, sensing her nervousness. Lucy gripped the reins tighter, remembering all Cal had taught her about riding these past days. They set out single file, Shandio leading the way across the scrubland. The morning air still held desert chill, but Lucy knew the heat would come soon enough. Dust rose from the horses' hooves as they picked their way between sage and creosote. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth. By mid-morning, they stopped at a small wash to water the horses. Lucy's thighs ached from hours in the saddle. How you holding up? Nate asked, offering her his canteen. I'll manage, Lucy said, trying to sound braver than she felt. The water was sun-warm, but welcome. Grandmother says the land office clerks can be tricky, Nate continued, his tone lighter. But don't worry, they've never met anyone like you. Before, Lucy wasn't sure if that was a compliment or not, but Nate's easy smile helped ease her worry. They rode on through the heat of day, stopping twice more to rest the horses. Lucy's borrowed hat cast some shade, but sweat still trickled down her neck. The endless rhythm of hoofbeats matched her heartbeat. Proof, dash proof, dash proof, finally. As the afternoon stretched long, they crested a rise and saw Gallup spread before them. The railroad tracks cut through town like a steel river, steam rising from a waiting locomotive. The land office sat in a red brick building near the tracks. They tied their horses at the hitching rail, dust coating their clothes. Lucy's legs trembled as she dismounted, but she forced herself to stand straight. Inside, the office was dim and paper-scented. A thin clerk peered at them over wire-rimmed glasses, his gaze sliding from Shandio to Cal before settling on Lucy with barely concealed disdain. "May I help you?" he drawled. Lucy stepped forward, willing her voice steady. "Yes, sir. I need to verify a water rights filing from 5 years ago." The clerk's lips twitched. My. Quite an appetite for paperwork you have there, miss." Heat flooded Lucy's cheeks. She saw Cal's jaw clench, but before he could speak, Nate stepped smoothly forward. "Reckon anyone to work up an appetite wrestling with all these dusty files?" he said easily. "Though seems to me you ain't exactly missed many meals yourself, mister." The clerk's hand went self-consciously to his round middle, as several other customers in the office poorly hid their chuckles. His face reddened. Lucy pulled out her mother's papers. "The docket number is 1873-412, she said clearly. "Filed under the name Hollis. Hollis." The clerk frowned. "Don't recall any such filing." "Perhaps you should." "Check again," Shandio suggested quietly. "Sometimes papers get ... MIS 5 lead." The clerk's eyes narrowed at her tone, but he disappeared into the back room. They waited in tense silence until he returned, a yellowed card in hand. "There is a notation," he admitted reluctantly. "Notice of water use, filed by one Sarah Hollis, in care of Reverend Abel Cartwright's address. But that's hardly a proper deed." "It proves the filing existed," Cal said firmly, "and that Lucy's mother followed proper procedure." The clerk sniffed, "Perhaps, but without the original documents... "We'll need a certified copy of that card," Shandio interrupted. For the territorial record, a clerk looked like he'd bitten something sour, but under their combined stares, he began copying out the information. The sun was setting as they led their horses away from town. The precious copy tucked safely in Lucy's satchel. They made camp in a sheltered draw, where Cal built a small fire that sent sparks rising toward emerging stars. After their simple supper, Squash, Shandio, and Nate spread their bedrolls on one side of the fire, while Lucy and Cal settled on the other. The night air grew cool, carrying the lonely cry of a coyote. "Thank you," Lucy said softly, "for coming with me today." Cal was quiet a moment, watching the flames. "My sister Hannah," he said finally. "She never let anyone make her feel small. Either she'd have liked your spirit." Lucy felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. Here, under the vast, star-scattered sky, with these people who'd stood beside her, she felt something new taking root, a sense of belonging, of having found her place at last. The fire crackled softly as they settled for the night, its light gentle on their faces. Tomorrow, they'd ride home to Blue Jacob's Eye, carrying proof that Lucy's claim was real. It wasn't a complete victory yet, but it was a beginning. It was a beginning. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard when Reverend Cartwright's buggy rattled up to Cal's shack. Lucy looked up from where she sat on the porch, studying her mother's ledger. The Reverend's face was drawn with worry as he climbed down, clutching a leather satchel to his chest. "Miss Lucy," he said, removing his hat. "Is Cal about?" "Right here," Reverend Cal called, emerging from the barn. He wiped his hands on his work pants and came to stand beside Lucy's chair. The Reverend pulled a sealed envelope from his satchel, yellowed with age. His hands trembled slightly. "I've been keeping this. Should have given it to you years ago, Lucy. It's from your mother." Lucy accepted the envelope, her heart quickening. She recognized her mother's neat handwriting instantly. The seal cracked as she opened it, and several pages slipped out, along with a small tin-type photograph. "I'll read it," she said softly, unfolding the letter. "My dearest Lucy, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And Reverend Cartwright has finally delivered what I entrusted to him. There's something you need to know about your father. ... Single. Quotes, Lucy's voice faltered. Cal leaned closer, protective. She drew a deep breath and continued. His name was James Hollis, and he was Caleb Thorne's trail partner for 3 seasons. We were married by common law, though there was never time for a proper ceremony before the fever took him. I never told you because the grief was too fresh, but you deserve to know your heritage. The tintype shows us together, with Cal standing witness." Cal's sharp intake of breath made Lucy look up. His face had gone pale as he stared at the small photograph. There was his younger self, standing beside a smiling couple, Lucy's parents. "I remember that day," he whispered. "James was so proud. I never knew they'd made it official when the fever hit the camp." He stopped, emotion catching in his throat. Lucy reached for his hand, her own eyes filling with tears. All this time, they'd been connected, without knowing. No wonder Cal had stepped forward to defend her. Some part of him must have recognized James in her face. "There's more," Reverend Cartwright said quietly. "The letter explains about the spring." Lucy returned to reading. "The water right at Blue Jacob's Eye is your inheritance, but it comes with a responsibility. I've seen how the Dine people respect the spring, how they've shared it for generations. Promise me you'll honor that tradition." Shandy O, who had been listening silently from the doorway, stepped forward. "Your mother was wise," she said. "She understood that water belongs to no one person. It must be shared, like the rain and sun. But the railroad won't see it that way," Cal said, his jaw tight. "They'll try to take it all. Then we must act." "First," Shandio replied. Her dark eyes were sharp with purpose. "We should create a covenant, binding in territorial law before they can move their machines in." Lucy sat straighter, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "A shared water agreement. Could we do that? With enough signatures from both settlers and Dine leaders?" "Yes," Shandio nodded. "It would protect everyone's right to use the spring." Over the next 2 days, Lucy worked tirelessly at Cal's kitchen table, drafting the covenant. Her neat figures filled page after page as she calculated watering schedules for different seasons. Dine sheep herds would have morning access, ranch stock in the afternoon, and wagon trains could fill barrels at sunset. She added special provisions for drought years, ensuring no one would be turned away in desperate times. Cal watched her work, something shifting in his gaze. The shy girl who'd arrived with a peach pie was emerging as a leader in her own right. She didn't need his protection anymore. She was becoming a protector herself. Mrs. Bertie Quinn was the first to sign. When Lucy presented the covenant, "About time someone showed some sense about that spring," she declared, her pen scratching decisively across the paper. "Water's meant for sharing, just like the good Lord's grace." Several ranchers followed, convinced by the careful scheduling that would prevent conflicts over access. Even Mrs. Ivy Mercer from the Mercantile hesitated only briefly before adding her name. "Well," she said stiffly, smoothing her skirts, "I suppose it's better than letting the railroad take over." But there was a softening around her eyes as she watched Lucy thank her. That evening, Lucy sat on the porch steps, holding the tintype of her parents. Cal settled beside her, his bulk familiar and comforting. "I wish I'd known," he said quietly. "About you being James's daughter. I would have... You did exactly what he would have wanted," Lucy interrupted. "You gave me a home when I needed one. That's what family does." Cal's big hand covered hers gently. "Reckon you're right about that," he said, his voice rough with emotion. They sat together as the sun set, the spring steady music playing in the background. While inside the shack, the covenant lay drying. its signature is a testament to the power of shared purpose and newfound family bonds. The Sunday afternoon sun warmed the church green as townsfolk gathered in their best clothes. Lucy May Hollis stood at the front steps, the covenant papers trembling slightly in her hands. Her mother's calico dress, freshly pressed for the occasion, caught the breeze. Beside her, Shandy Onez's presence radiated calm strength, her silver jewelry catching glints of sunlight. Lucy's throat felt dry as she looked out at the crowd. Some faces showed curiosity, others skepticism. Deputy Creech lounged at the back, arms crossed. But there was Bertie Quinn in the front row, nodding encouragement, and Cal standing tall near the hitching post, his quiet confidence steadying her nerves. "Folks," Lucy began, her voice wavering. She cleared her throat and started again, stronger. "Folks of Cottonwood Flats, thank you for coming today. I'm here to present a covenant for Blue Jacob's Eye Spring." The paper rattled less. Now, as she read the carefully drafted agreement, her clear voice carried across the green, explaining the scheduled access times, the provisions for drought years, and the shared responsibility for maintaining the spring's flow. When she described how the Dine sheep herders and settler cattle would each have their turn at watering, heads began nodding in the crowd. "This covenant ensures no one goes thirsty," Lucy continued, her confidence growing. "Not people, not livestock, not travelers passing through. Just like my mama always said, there's enough if we share with wisdom." Shandio stepped forward. Then, her dark eyes scanning the gathering. "For generations, my people have known this spring as a place of peace. This agreement honors that tradition and creates new bonds between neighbors." She gestured to the signatures already collected. "Many have shown their support. We invite others to join them." Reverend Cartwright moved to the front, his Bible clutched to his chest. "Let us pray," he announced, bowing his head. "Lord, we thank you for this water that sustains all your children. Bless this covenant and those who uphold it. Guide us in sharing your gifts with grace and fairness. Amen." As heads lifted, Bertie Quinn's voice rang out, strong and clear. "Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine." Others joined in, the familiar hymn swelling across the green. Lucy saw Mrs. Mercer singing, her usual pinched expression softened. Even some of the ranch hands who rarely attended church added their voices to the chorus. The music faded, and people began stepping forward too. Ranchers whose cattle depended on the spring. Traders who supplied both towns and Dine camps. Mothers who hauled water for their gardens. Each signature strengthened the promise of shared stewardship. As the afternoon wore on, dark clouds began building over the mesas. The first fat drops of rain sent people hurrying for shelter. But the children stayed out, faces turned up to the rare summer shower. Soon they were splashing in the puddles, forming on the church green. Their Sunday clothes forgotten in the joy of unexpected water, Lucy and Cal rode back to the spring through the gentle rain. At the gate, Cal pulled a fresh-carved cedar board. From his saddlebag, the letters were deep and sure. "Hollistorn Spring, Nez welcome." "Reckon that makes it official," he said, mounting the sign above the spring stone facing. The rain had darkened the cedar, making the carved words stand out clear and sharp. Later, as evening settled in, Lucy sat on the porch watching the rain paint silver streaks in the gathering dusk. Nate Nez joined her, leaning against the railing with easy grace. "Grandmother says you did well today," he said, grinning. High praise coming from her. Lucy smiled, feeling the warmth of the compliment. "I was scared at first," she admitted. "But then I remembered what we were fighting for. Not just water rights, but the right way of using them." "Got plans for improving the spring?" Nate asked. "Grandmother mentioned you had some ideas about better troughs for the sheep." "I've been thinking about that." Lucy nodded eagerly. If we set up another watering station downstream, it would ease the crowding and maybe build some shade shelters for people waiting their turn. They talked as the rain fell steady and soft, sharing visions of how the spring could serve everyone better. Lucy described her mother's dream of a garden near the washing rocks, while Nate suggested ways to protect the banks from erosion during the rainy season. Neither of them noticed the lone rider on the distant road, barely visible through the rain. Josiah Gant sat his horse in silence, watching the lamplights spill from the cabin windows. The reins hung loose in one hand as he studied the scene. The new sign, the young people on the porch, the peaceful settling of evening over the spring. His expression was unreadable in the gathering dark. Inside the cabin, Bertie was setting out coffee and her famous apple cake, while Cal and Shandio discussed the upcoming shearing season. The rain drummed gentle on the roof and the springs. Voice blended with quiet conversation and occasional laughter. For this moment, at least, the world felt right and full of promise. Lucy jolted awake to an unfamiliar crackling sound. The acrid smell of smoke filled her lungs, making her cough. Through her window, an orange glow flickered against the night sky. Her heart hammered as she stumbled from bed, calling out, "Cal!" Fire! The heat hit her before she reached the main. Room flames were already crawling up the outer wall, their hungry tongues licking at the dry wood. The fire cast dancing shadows across the floor, and smoke began pouring through gaps in the boards. "Lucy!" Cal's voice boomed from the hallway. Kitchen door. Now. She could barely see through the thickening smoke. Cal's massive form appeared beside her, his nightshirt darkened with soot. A tremendous crack split the air as one of the ceiling. Beams gave way, showering sparks. "Move!" Cal grabbed her arm, practically lifting her off her feet as he steered them toward the kitchen. Behind them, the beam crashed down, sending up a fountain of embers. They burst through the kitchen door. Into the cool night air, gasping, Lucy spun around to see flames consuming the front of the shack. "The papers!" she cried, starting back toward the door. "No." Cal caught her, then suddenly yelled in pain. A burning timber had fallen across his forearm, leaving an angry red welt. Up, he staggered, clutching the injury. Hoofbeats thundered in the darkness. Nate Nez appeared on his pinto, leading his grandmother's horse. Shandio dismounted before her horse fully stopped, already issuing rapid instructions in dyne to her grandson. "The spring," she called to Lucy and Cal. "We need buckets, blankets, anything to carry water." Mate formed a line, passing containers of spring water up from the creek bed. Steam hissed where the water hit the flames. Cal worked one-handed, his burned arm held close to his chest, but he refused to stop. The fire fought them for what felt like hours, but gradually began to lose its grip on the shack. By the time false dawn began painting the sky, the fire was out. The front wall was charred black, and the roof had partially collapsed. Smoke still rose from the ruins in thin gray ribbons. Lucy sat on an overturned bucket, exhausted and streaked with soot. Her mother's ledger lay in ashes somewhere in the wreckage. The sound of approaching horses made them all look up. Josiah Gant rode at the head of a group of men, including Deputy Creech and 2 railroad surveyors. Gant's expression was a mask. "A false concern. It's terrible business," he said, shaking his head. "We heard about the fire. Some dine boys were seen running from the area last night." Shandio stepped forward, her voice sharp with anger. "You lie. Our people would never. Now." Gant cut her off smoothly. He produced an official-looking document from his coat. "Given this unfortunate incident and the clear danger of leaving the spring under uncertain management, I have here an emergency injunction. The territorial court grants the railroad immediate rights to secure and divert the water supply." Deputy Creech wouldn't meet anyone's eyes as he dismounted. From his saddlebag, he took out a wooden notice and a hammer. The sharp reports of nails being driven into the surviving porch post echoed in the morning stillness. "You're being served with an eviction notice," he mumbled, still not looking at Lucy. "Got 24 hours to clear out." Cal stepped forward, his burned arm forgotten. "This is theft, pure and simple." "You set that fire yourself, Gant." "Careful, Thorne." Gant's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's a serious accusation. Without proof, it could be considered slander. Besides, I was in town all night, plenty of witnesses." The railroad men were already unloading stakes and canvas from their pack horses. They worked quickly, setting up temporary channels to divert the spring's flow into a large cistern. Lucy watched helplessly as the clear stream that had run free for generations was trapped and redirected. Within hours, the original creek bed held only a weak trickle. The sound of the water, which had lulled her to sleep every night since coming here, was muffled and wrong. She climbed carefully through the ruined shack, salvaging what she could. Her mother's Bible had survived, though its edges were scorched. In the tin box under her bed, she found the survey sketch and land office docket card, the only remaining proof of her claim. She clutched them to her chest. These precious fragments of her inheritance. Nate appeared in the doorway, his usual good humor replaced by quiet anger. "We saved what we could from the back room," he said. "Grandmother's gathering the neighbors." "This isn't over." Lucy nodded, but her throat was too tight to speak. Through the broken window, she could see Cal arguing with Deputy Creech, his injured arm now swollen and angry-looking. Shandio stood by the spring, watching the railroad. Men work with ancient sadness in her eyes. The sun climbed higher, harsh and bright. Lucy stepped out of the ruined shack, holding her salvaged papers like shields against what was to come. The smell of smoke still hung in the air, mingling with the dust kicked up by the workers' boots. The spring's voice had been reduced to a whisper, but she could still hear it, still flowing, still fighting, still alive. The next morning's sun rose over the burned shack, casting long shadows through the damaged walls. Cal stood at the wash basin, his movements stiff as he fastened his shirt buttons one-handed. His burned arm was wrapped in strips of clean cotton, but anger burned hotter than any physical pain. Without a word, he reached for the worn leather holster hanging by the door. Lucy watched from the kitchen doorway, her heart sinking as Cal checked the chambers of his revolver before strapping it to his hip. The steel gleamed dully in the morning light. "You can't go after him," she said quietly. Cal's jaw tightened. "He burned our home, Lucy. Tried to steal your birthright. A man's got to answer for that." Lucy moved quickly, placing herself between Cal and the door. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, but her voice was steady. "And what happens after? You'll end up in jail, or worse. The spring will still be lost, and everything Mama worked for will be gone. Sometimes a man's got to take a stand," Cal insisted, but his hand dropped away from the revolver's grip. "We will take a stand," Lucy said. "But with the law and our neighbors beside us, not gunfire. Please, Cal, I need your help, not your vengeance." The silence stretched between them. Finally, Cal's broad shoulders sagged, with deliberate movements. He unbuckled the holster and hung it back on its peg. His jaw was still clenched tight, but the dangerous light had faded from his eyes. "You're right," he admitted roughly. "Your mama would have said the same thing." Lucy touched his uninjured arm gently. "We'll ride into town this afternoon. Reverend Cartwright sent word he wants to meet with us." They saddled up after the midday meal, Lucy on her steady bay mare and Cal on his rangy buckskin. The ride into Cottonwood Flats was quiet, both lost in their thoughts as the hooves kicked up dust from the dry trail. The church stood white against the blue sky, its spire reaching toward heaven like a finger, pointing the way. Reverend Cartwright was waiting on the steps, his Bible clutched to his chest like armor. His face was lined with worry, but determination shone in his eyes. "I've been praying all night," he said, as they dismounted. "The Lord's shown me clear as day what needs doing. I'm going to testify about the filing, about my part in all this." Cal's expression darkened. "Bit late for that, ain't it, Reverend?" "Cal," Lucy warned softly. To the Reverend, she said, "Thank you. But will anyone listen? They'll listen here." Cartwright gestured to the church behind him, in the Lord's house, where truth holds sway. "We'll hold the hearing right here, where the whole community can witness." Lucy's eyes widened. The whole community. Every soul who signed that covenant needs to be here. The Reverend said firmly, and the dying herders too. Their rights are bound up in this same fight. Lucy turned to Cal. "Nate could spread the word. He knows all the grazing camps." Cal nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Might work. Truth's got power when it's spoken plain, especially with witnesses." "I'll ride out now," Lucy said, "all ready." Turning back to her horse, Nate usually works the north pasture this time of day. She found him exactly where she expected, mending fence with quick, sure movements. His face lit up when she explained the plan. "Count on me," he said, coiling his rope with practiced ease. "I'll tell every herder between here and the mesa. Grandmother will make sure they come. Make sure they come." The judge's voice hardened. "Now, to the matter of frontier justice." He surveyed the crowded church. "Too often, I have seen good people allow fear and prejudice to override their better natures. We cannot build a civilization on mockery, intimidation, or violence. The law must protect all citizens equally, or it protects none truly." Deputy Walter Creech stood up slowly, removing his hat. His young face showed the strain of conscience working against pride. "Your Honor," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I aim to speak, if I may." The judge nodded. Creech turned to face Lucy. "Miss Hollis, I did you wrong that day at the social. Made sport of you to look big in others' eyes. It wasn't worthy of the badge I wear, nor the man I hope to be." He swallowed hard. "I'm powerful, sorry for it." "Thank you, Deputy," Lucy replied softly. "That means a fair piece to me." From her seat near the front, Mrs. Ivy Mercer suddenly burst into tears. "Oh, Lucy," she sobbed, "I've been so hard on you. So hard on everyone." Her shoulders shook as years of carefully maintained composure crumbled. "After my baby was born still, I couldn't bear to see others happy. Wrapped my grief up in judgment, making everyone else feel as lonely as I did." Bertie Quinn moved to sit beside her, offering silent comfort as Mrs. Mercer continued through her tears. "But watching you stand up for what's right, seeing how you've brought folks together instead of pushing them apart, opened my eyes to my own bitterness." The judge waited patiently until Mrs. Mercer had composed herself. Then his expression grew stern again as he focused on Josiah Gant. "Mr. Gant, the evidence of criminal sabotage is compelling. Boot prints matching railroad issue. A suspicious fire following threats to the property. Deliberate tampering with a water source." He gestured to the deputy. "Mr. Creech, take this man into custody. He will be transported to the territorial prison to await trial for destruction of property and attempted water theft." As Deputy Creech moved to arrest Gant, the railroad agent's smooth manner finally cracked. "This is absurd," he spat. "You're choosing a fat girl's scratch of paper over progress, over civilization itself." "No, sir," the judge replied coldly. "I'm choosing justice over convenience and community over greed. There's your civilization." The deputy led Gant away, his protests fading into the morning air. The crowd began to disperse, blinking in the bright sunlight that flooded the churchyard. Lucy stood with Cal, watching as neighbors stopped to shake hands or share quiet words of reconciliation. Shandio approached, her dark eyes warm with approval. She took Lucy's hands in her weathered ones, speaking with the weight of generations in her voice. "The spring has always been more than water to my people," she said. "It has been a meeting place, a peace place. Now it will be something even more precious, a promise kept between neighbors." She smiled. "Your mother would be proud of how you've honored her vision." Lucy felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of joy this time. The morning breeze carried the scent of sage and summer grass, and somewhere in the distance, a mourning dove called not in sorrow, but in celebration of a new day dawning over Cottonwood Flats. Dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and golds, as wagons began rolling toward Blue Jacob's Eye. The morning air carried the sweet scent of wild grass and fresh-cut lumber. Lucy stood on the scorched foundation of the shack, watching as families from both Cottonwood Flats and the surrounding grazing lands converged on the spring. Shandio and 3 other Dine women spread blankets beneath the old cottonwoods, setting out baskets of blue corn mush and dried fruit. Bertie Quinn's wagon rattled up, loaded with bread loaves and pie tins, while Mrs. Mercer followed with a huge pot of beef stew nestled in straw. "Reckon we'll need every bit of that food," Cal observed, careful not to jostle his bandaged arm. "Looks like half the territory's shown up to help." Lucy nodded, her heart swelling at the sight. Where just days ago she'd felt isolated and mocked, now she saw friendly faces everywhere she looked. Even Deputy Creech had come, his badge glinting as he helped unload timber from Jerome McKenzie's freight wagon. "Miss Lucy," called young Tommy Porter, nearly tripping over his own feet as he rushed up with an armload of nails. "Where do you want these?" She smiled, pointing to a cleared spot near the foundation. "Right there would be fine, Tommy. Mind you, don't spill them." More children appeared, forming a cheerful bucket brigade between the spring and the work site. Sarah Mercer and little Maggie Quinn ferried tools, while Nate organized the older boys into teams for carrying boards. Cal took charge of the building crew, his quiet authority drawing everyone's attention. "We'll start with the main support beams," he said, sketching lines in the dirt with a stick. "For men to each post mind that southwest corner, it'll need extra bracing against the wind." Lucy found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity, directing where supplies should go and helping Bertie organize the meal preparations. Her natural talent for figures proved useful as she calculated lumber needs and tracked the inventory of nails and hardware. The morning passed in a blur of hammering, sawing, and good-natured banter. The new frame rose steadily, stronger than the original. Women called out encouragement from the shade, while children darted about with messages and fresh water for the workers. "Lucy, come see." Nate waved her over to where several men were raising the porch posts, or making it wider than before room, enough for everybody to sit and watch the sunset. She beamed at the thought. The old porch had barely fit 2 chairs, but this one would welcome all who came to water their stock or share news. By midday, the main structure stood complete. Shandio called everyone to rest and eat, and conversation flowed as freely as the spring itself. Lucy found herself seated between Cal and Mrs. Mercer, who kept pressing second helpings on her with motherly insistence. "You're doing your mama," proud Mrs. Mercer said softly. "She always said this spring would bring folks together someday. Wish I'd listened to her wisdom sooner." After the meal, work resumed with fresh energy. The afternoon sun tracked across the sky as walls went up, and windows were set in place. Bertie Quinn supervised the younger girls in sweeping out construction debris, turning even that task into a game. Near sunset, Cal carefully unpacked the new cedar sign he'd carved. "Would you like to do the honors?" he asked Lucy, holding out the hammer. She took it with trembling hands. The words "Hollistorn Spring Naz Welcome" stood out in deep relief against the polished wood. As she drove in the first nail, a cheer went up from the gathered crowd. Bertie stepped forward, her face glowing with pride. "That's as fine a sign as I've ever seen," she declared, helping Lucy secure the other corner. And right proper, too, naming all the families who belong here. The last golden rays of sunlight struck the fresh-cut lumber of the completed shack. It stood taller and broader than before, with wide windows and the welcoming porch wrapped around two sides. Inside, the room still smelled of sawdust and possibility as the workers began packing up their tools. Cal touched Lucy's elbow. "Got something else that needs doing," he said quietly. "Come inside a minute." In the new main room, lit by Bertie's lamp, Cal pulled a set of papers from his vest pocket. Lucy recognized the territorial seal at the top. "These here are guardianship papers," he explained, his deep voice gentle. "If you're willing, they'll make me your legal ward until you turn 18. Give you protection under the law, same as if you were my own kin." Lucy's vision blurred with tears as she watched Cal's strong hand carefully sign his name. The lamp cast warm shadows across the fresh wooden walls of the place that was now truly home. "Thank you," she whispered, adding her own signature beneath. His, for everything. Outside, the evening air filled with the sounds of wagons departing and cheerful goodbyes. But inside the sturdy new shack, Lucy felt the profound peace of belonging. No longer was she the awkward girl folks whispered about. She was Lucy May Hollis of Blue Jacob's Eye, with a family and community who saw her true worth. Bertie's voice called from the porch. "You two come get some supper before it's all gone." They stepped out into the twilight, where a few families still lingered around the cooking fires. The new sign caught the last light of day, its letters promising welcome to all who passed. Above the spring, the first stars began to appear, twinkling. Down on a place where understanding had finally taken root and flourished. Morning sunlight sparkled on Blue Jacob's Eye, turning the water to liquid gold. A week had passed since the rebuilding, and the new shack stood proud against the cloudless sky. Lucy sat on the wide porch, running her fingers over fresh-cut planks still fragrant with cedar. The spring bubbled steadily, its song unchanged despite all that had happened. Hoofbeats announced visitors, and Lucy looked up to see Shandio and Nate approaching. The Dine matriarch carried something folded carefully across her saddle horn, wrapped in clean muslin. Behind her, wagons appeared on the trail townspeople, making their way to the spring for the Sunday gathering. "Good morning, Shiatsi," Shandi called out, using the affectionate term for little one that had become her special name for Lucy. She dismounted with grace, the wrapped bundle cradled. In her arms, Lucy hurried down the porch steps. "Welcome. Cal's just gone to fetch more cups for the service." Shandy's eyes crinkled with warmth as she held out the muslin-wrapped package. "I have something for you, keeper of the waters." Lucy carefully unfolded the cloth. Inside lay a saddle blanket of exceptional beauty, woven in rich earth tones, with striking patterns of blue running through it like flowing streams. The wool was impossibly soft under her fingers, and the weaving so tight and precise it looked like painted silk. "Oh," Lucy breathed, tracing the intricate waterlines. "It's beautiful." "The pattern tells the story of Blue Jacob's Eye," Shandio explained, pointing to various symbols. "Here is the spring, here the people who share it, and here she. Touched a complex diamond shape is you binding us all together." Tears welled in Lucy's eyes. "Thank you. I'll treasure it always." More wagons arrived as Lucy carefully hung the blanket inside. Reverend Cartwright's buggy pulled up, followed by Bertie Quinn's wagon full of children. The morning air filled with greetings and the sounds of people gathering. Cal returned with a crate of tin cups, setting them up on a plank table near the spring. He nodded approvingly at the growing crowd. "Looks like we'll need every one of these." The Reverend had been conferring quietly with Shandio. "Naya," he stepped forward, Bible in hand. "If everyone's ready, we'll begin with the baptisms." Lucy's heart quickened. She'd been preparing for this moment all week, yet nervous butterflies still danced in her stomach. She watched as two dying children, a boy and girl in their best clothes, stepped up beside her. Their parents beamed with pride. "Today we gather at these living waters," Reverend Cartwright began, his voice carrying clearly across the crowd, "to welcome 3 souls into God's family. This spring has long been a place of sharing and peace. How fitting that it now serves to unite us further in faith and fellowship." He turned to the children first, speaking their names in careful Dine, then English. Each stepped into the cool water, received the blessing, and emerged to their parents' embrace. Finally, it was Lucy's turn. The water felt silk smooth around her ankles as she waded in. Sunlight dazzled on the surface, and a profound peace settled over her. This was right. This was where she belonged. "Lucy May Hollis," Reverend Cartwright intoned, "do you accept this baptism of your own free will?" "I do," she answered clearly. The water closed over her briefly, cool and sweet. When she stood again, droplets sparkling in her hair, the gathered crowd burst into spontaneous applause. Cal offered his hand to help her from the spring, his eyes suspiciously bright as Lucy dried off and changed behind a screen on the porch. She heard excited voices from the yard. Emerging, she found Nate at the center of a congratulatory group. "The judge himself recommended me," he was saying, his usual grin even wider than normal. "Said if we're serious about shared water rights, the railroad needs Dine workers who understand both worlds. I'll be apprenticed to Tom Begay, the new water foreman. That's wonderful news." Lucy hugged him impulsively, then stepped back, blushing. "Indeed it is," Shandio agreed, proudly. "My grandson will help ensure the railroad keeps its promises about water use." The morning's excitement settled into a peaceful afternoon gathering. Families spread blankets in the shade, sharing food and conversation. Children played tag around the spring, their laughter mixing with the water's song. Cal touched Lucy's shoulder, gesturing toward the shack. "Got something to show you inside." In the main room, a new desk stood by the window, its surface gleaming with fresh polish. A leather-bound ledger lay centered upon it, along with a properly labeled inkwell and several crisp quills. "The Shared Water Association needs a proper bookkeeper," Cal explained. "Someone who knows figures and understands both sides of the territory. Someone folks trust, to be fair." Lucy ran her fingers over the ledger's smooth cover. "You mean me. Can't think of anyone better suited." He opened the book to its first blank page. "What do you say?" Lucy picked up a quill, dipped it carefully in the ink, and wrote in her steadiest hand, "Blue Jacob's Eye, Water Register, Summer 8. Below that, she added, "Lucy May Hollis, Keeper of Accounts." The letters stood bold and black against the cream paper, marking not just the beginning of records, but the start of something larger. Promise to protect both the spring and the covenant that bound the community together. Your mama would be proud, Cal said softly, and so am I. Through the window, Lucy could see the spring catching afternoon light, could hear the mixed voices of townspeople and Dine sharing stories and laughter. The new saddle blanket hung on the wall, its woven waters echoing the real ones outside. Here, finally, was the belonging she'd always sought. She wrote the date beneath her name, the quill scratching softly against paper. Each careful letter declared her place in this new chapter not as someone to be mocked or dismissed, but as guardian of something precious, a spring that gave both water and hope to all who came to its banks. The first stars were appearing in the lavender sky as Lucy set the fresh-baked peach pie on the windowsill to cool. Inside the rebuilt shack, lamplight cast a warm glow over the sturdy new walls and polished floorboards. The scent of summer fruit and buttery crust mingled with the clean evening air drifting through the open window. Cal settled into his chair, at the head of the table, his burned arm nearly healed now. The familiar creak of the porch boards announced Shandy's presence as she worked at her spinning. The gentle whir of her spindle, adding its music to the spring's constant song. "Shall we say grace?" Cal asked, extending his weathered hands. Lucy clasped one, feeling the strength that had defended her that first difficult day at the church social. How far she had come since then, from a girl shrinking from cruel whispers to someone who could stand tall and speak her mind. "For this food and this family, we give thanks," Cal prayed, his deep voice soft with gratitude. "For water that flows and hearts that heal, we are grateful. Amen." Just as Lucy began slicing the pie, bootsteps sounded on the porch. Nate appeared in the doorway, grinning as he removed his hat. "Evening, folks," he said, breathing in appreciatively. "Sure smells good in here." "It's perfect timing," Lucy laughed, setting out another plate. "Come tell us the news from town." Nate settled onto the bench, accepting a generous slice of pie. "Railroad's keeping its word about the water levels. Tom Begay, that's my new boss. He's teaching me how to measure flow rates proper." His eyes sparkled with pride. "Says I have a good eye for it." "That you do," Shandio called from the porch, her spindle never missing a beat. "Oh, and Mrs. Mercer asked me to give you this." Nate pulled an envelope from his vest pocket. "Another donation for the Covenant Fund. She says it's important to keep the spring running right." Lucy accepted the envelope, remembering how the stern shopkeeper had once looked at her with such judgment. Now Mrs. Mercer was one of the Covenant's strongest supporters. Her grief slowly healing through acts of kindness. The spring burbled steadily outside, its flow restored to full strength after the railroad's attempt to divert it. Lucy rose and walked to the window, gazing out at the yard bathed in rising moonlight. The new cedar sign caught the silver glow, its carefully carved letters clear even in the darkness. Hollisthorne Spring Nez, welcome. Standing there, Lucy felt the weight of the changes these past months had brought. The scared, lonely girl, who once clutched a peach pie while others mocked her size, seemed like a stranger now. In her place stood someone stronger, young woman, who had found her voice, who kept the books for a shared water covenant. A coup helped bridge the gap between settlers and dying. More than that, she had found family. Not just Cal, with his quiet strength and unwavering support, but Shandio with her wise counsel, Nate with his ready smile, and even Mrs. Mercer with her path from judgment to understanding. The whole community, once divided, now gathered regularly at the spring that belonged to everyone and no one. Lucy returned to the table, where Cal and Nate were discussing the fall roundup, their voices mixing with Shandy's soft humming and the eternal music of Blue Jacob's Eye. Here, finally, was the belonging she had always yearned for, not built on fitting in, but on standing firm for what was right. Thanks for watching. Stories like this shape us in ways we don't always expect. If something resonated, subscribe. I'm back tomorrow with another one worth hearing.